Okay, so I have no idea how this video is going to look. I'm shooting it at 24 frames a second, which is totally new for me. I don't normally record videos in this, but without further ado, let's just jump into the video. What is going on, everybody? My name is Mark Moody, and I hope you're having an awesome day wherever you may be viewing this video. And in today's little video tutorial slash whatever, Mark's talking in front of a camera, I'm going to talk to you guys about astrophotography. Now, what does that big word mean? Well, basically it means taking pictures of the night sky, of the stars, of the Milky Way, or anything of the like. And today I'm going to teach you guys about how to get pictures of the night sky, how to take photographs of the Milky Way, and how to kind of spice up those pictures while you're out there in the field getting them. So there's a few things that come into play with astrophotography. Number one, the gear. First thing you'll need is a camera. Once you have one of these, you're off to a great start. Number two, you're going to want to go ahead and grab a lens. What kind of lens? So there's a few different lenses you could use. Typically, if you're shooting full frame, anything that is a 35mm or wider will do just fine. Or if you're shooting APS-C or on a crop sensor camera, anything that has a focal length of 24mm or wider is pretty darn good too. Now with astrophotography, you're going to want to pick a lens that is good in low light. Anything that has an aperture of 1.4 up to f4 is pretty darn good. You don't want to shoot stars any higher than f4 because then you'll introduce noise to your camera with adjusting your ISO, and then your star pictures really won't look that good. But really the sweet spot to shoot stars at is 2.8, so if a lens can go all the way down to 2.8, definitely use that lens. I use a 16-35 f2.8 and I find that puppy does amazing with taking pictures of the stars. Another plus is that if you have a lens with a focus window, that is a great thing too. If your lens does not have a focus window, I'll show you how to get around that later in the video. The other thing you're going to want to bring with you is a flashlight. The next piece of equipment you'll want to have is a tripod. You're going to need something that's going to keep your camera nice and steady when you take the shot, because you're going to be using a slow shutter speed, so minimizing the movement of your camera is extremely important, and having a tripod allows for you to do that. The next piece of equipment is sort of optional, and there are ways around it if you can't get it, and that is a shutter release cable. The shutter release cable allows you to control the opening and closing of the shutter off camera, so it minimizes that little bit of camera shake that comes from when you hit the shutter button. And making sure that you minimize any movement, whether it's with the tripod or with the shutter release cable, is extremely important. If you can't get your hands on a shutter release cable, that's okay. Set your camera to take its picture after a 2-second timer. That 2-second timer allows your camera to sort of steady itself out after that little bit of camera shake that comes from you hitting the shutter button. So once you take that picture, step back, 2 seconds have passed, your camera's nice and steady, and then you get your shot. Or to go the extra mile, if your camera has a Wi-Fi function, you can connect your camera to your phone using an app, and you just go ahead and you just click the shutter right from your phone. So now that we've got our gear worked out, it's time for us to plan our shoot. And there's a lot of factors that come into play when planning where and when you're going to take pictures of the night sky. One of the biggest things to consider is light pollution. It is important to take these pictures in an area where there is as little light pollution as possible. Now that doesn't mean you need to travel thousands of miles away from civilization just to get a decent picture of the Milky Way. You'd be surprised how close a clear sky is just from where you live. Now believe it or not, I live in a very heavily populated area, and just 20 minutes outside of where I live, I can get a very clear sky. And some nights I can even see the Milky Way. So don't think you have to travel very far just to get these shots. Planning the location, planning where your camera needs to be facing the sky, planning where certain things are going to be in the sky is very important, and there are some resources you can use to figure those things out. Personally, I like to use this app called Sun Surveyor. Not sponsored. Now with Sun Surveyor, I can do a lot of different things. I can plan where the sun is going to be, I can plan where the moon is going to be, where the Milky Way is going to be, what time all those things are going to be, where they're going to be in the sky, days, weeks, months in advance, so I can plan my shot just right from my smartphone. I highly recommend this app. It's very versatile. I use it for a lot more than just astrophotography. If you want to check the app out, I'll leave a link for it in the description below. Alright, so now we've planned our shoot, now we have our equipment, it's time for us to go take our pictures. When you're out there in the field, there's a couple different camera settings you can use to get these pictures. The first thing you're going to want to adjust is your camera's ISO. It's ideal for you to photograph stars anywhere between ISO 800 and 1600. If you have to go any higher, never go above 3200, because then camera noise will really start to show up in your pictures and they won't look very good. The next thing you're going to want to do is your camera's aperture. Like I said earlier, shooting stars between f1.4 and f4 is ideal. f1.4 being great because it lets in tons of light, f4 being the max because it's kind of going to really have you to bump up your ISO, thus introducing noise. But if you can get your camera to go down to f2.8, that's great too. That's sort of the sweet spot to take pictures of stars in my opinion. opinion. The next thing is your shutter speed. Now this is something very interesting that I found out the first time I ever took pictures of stars. Now to get pictures of stars, you are shooting in low light conditions, so you're going to have to allow your camera to sort of suck in as much light as possible from the area around you, particularly the night sky. So your first thought is going to be, oh, let's slow the shutter speed down as much as possible. Let's crank it all the way down to 30 seconds. Don't do that. At 30 seconds, believe it or not, your stars will become very elongated if you zoom all the way into them on your photograph. And the reason being is because the rotation of the Earth is slowly happening. So those 30 seconds allow the Earth to move just ever so slightly that your stars are not going to come out to be perfectly rounded. So shooting stars at an exposure of somewhere between 15 and 20 seconds is perfect because it minimizes that risk of having that little minute effect of the Earth's rotation in your photographs. So 15 to 20 seconds, shooting somewhere between 800 and 1600 ISO, keeping your aperture at least f2.8 or f4 max is right where your camera settings want to be. Now, in addition to your camera settings, before you get ready to take your picture, you want to make sure your camera lens is focused correctly. So if your lens has a focus window, go ahead, focus that lens just barely to infinity. Never past infinity, never right on infinity, but just barely touching infinity. Now you may be sitting there thinking, well, Mark, I don't have a focus window. How can I see where my camera is focused at? Well, take that flashlight that I told you to bring with you earlier, go ahead and shine it on something, whether it be a tree or whether it be a rock, something, maybe even you have a friend with you, have that flashlight shine on them, make sure they're standing a good bit away, and right there, that's gonna be kind of your marker. Have it focused just barely on them, now you're good to go. Now when you take these pictures, actually, you're not gonna see your photograph right away. Now the exposure time times 2 is actually the amount of time you have to wait until you see your pictures. So let's say you take a 15-second exposure of the stars. Well, you have to wait another 15 seconds for that picture to be written down onto your memory card before you see it. So in total, that picture takes 30 whole seconds. So now you see your picture on the LCD, you just snapped that great picture of the Milky Way. What is next? Okay, well, you could just settle for that picture, or you could kind of spice up your photographs a little bit while you're out there getting them. My biggest tip, and this sort of falls into some other things, is using your environment. So it is essential that you can use whatever you have at your disposal, whether that be the trees, whether that maybe is like a townhouse out in the distance, or whether that's the fog that's starting to seep in right in the area around you while you're taking these pictures. They can all come in handy with acquiring the photograph. For example, while Dennis and I were up in the mountains in West Virginia photographing the Milky Way that one night, I could have settled for taking a picture like this, but instead I moved my tripod over a little bit so that the pine trees were sort of framing the Milky Way for me. So I used the trees to sort of frame the shot while we were up there in the mountain. And believe it or not, I prefer that picture over this one, just because there's that added extra little substance, a little bit of context in the shot, just to let you know, hey, I'm out in the woods taking pictures of the Milky Way. That was pretty cool. Now what I should have done also is I could have traveled into that forest just a little bit, maybe found a nice opening up in the canopy, tilted my camera up, snapped the picture, and then the canopy would have been framing the shot of the night sky. You can do that as well. So using different things in your environment to frame your shot really can add a little bit of zest to your astrophotography pictures. The other thing you can do is use light pollution to your advantage. For example, this shot right here, honestly, at first I didn't really think it was a very good shot, and then after going back, looked at it a little bit, and I was like, this is actually a pretty dope shot. Reason being is because that light pollution is coming from the resort, and it adds that little cool orange spotlight sort of projecting up into the sky, sort of leads your eyes to look up at the Milky Way itself. And furthermore, you can see that orange light really, really well because that mountain mist, and it sort of catches that light and sort of projects it right up into the sky. And I just realized I'm talking a little too much about this one photograph right here, but that's just an example. So you can use different things to your advantage, whether it could be the little bit of light pollution that's out there, it could be the mountain fog. Use the trees, use the different natural features to frame your shot, and I guarantee you that your astrophotography game will already be stepped up a little bit rather than just taking pictures of the sky. Years ago, when I first started out taking these pictures, I went from taking pictures like this to getting pictures like this, simply because I'm using the things that are in my environment at my disposal. And plus, adding these little features adds a little bit more of a perspective, that deeper meaning into your photograph. But then again, that's just my opinion. I don't know, you may be able to do something totally different while you're out there getting these pictures. So that is it for this one, folks. So if you found this video to be educational, found it to be inspiring, even thought-provoking for your photography, please go ahead, leave a like, leave a comment. Any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And I hope you guys will use some of these skills while you're out there capturing photos of the night sky. And if you do take some of these pictures and you throw them up on Instagram, go ahead and tag me in them so I can see them. I would love to see what you guys come up with using this knowledge. That would be so cool. Let's get that going. Instagram is right here. Follow me at Mark Moody Photo. Go ahead, hit subscribe and hit that bell icon right beside it. And I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.